everybody. This is Miguel Neves, the editor-in-chief of Skift Meeting, and I'd like to welcome you to today's podcast where we're focusing on IMEX America. The 2024 edition is happening starting tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Monday the 7th, which is when this launches, but if you're picking it up later, maybe it's already happened. But this show is all about making the most of IMEX America, which is the largest show for the meetings industry. And of course, we're going to be there with my colleagues who are also on this podcast, Andrea Doyle, our executive editor, and our editor, Barbara Scofidio.
Hey there, it's Seth Borko, the head of Skift Research, and I've got a brand new report that I want to share with you today. It's called our State of Travel 2024 report. It's perhaps the single most comprehensive report we do every year, and the best part, it's free to download right now. We have 350 plus insights in this report with pretty much a chart for basically any sector. Do you need a chart on hotels? We've got that. A chart on airlines? We've got it. A chart on consumer behavior? Guess what? We've got that too. I really appreciate if you check out our State of Travel report. You can download it now by going to skift.com/state of travel with dashes between every word. So that's skift.com/state-of-travel. Download the report, check it out, and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. If you enjoy the show, please rate us 5 stars, leave us a review so we can spread the word of the Skift Meetings podcast. Of course, share with friends and colleagues if you can. It really helps us get the word out about the podcast and keep it free for everybody to listen to. So I think this is my 12th IMEX America, something like that. I think you've been a few times, Andrea and Barbara as well.
Just a few.
And I'm not up to 12, but I've attended many times.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work for IMEX, so I had to attend. It was part of the job. But I actually joined just before the first show was launched, but I didn't go to the show. I was doing it remotely, and I was the social media manager at that point. And so it was really interesting to kind of listen online to everything that was happening and kind of almost sort of have like a control room kind of review of what was happening through social media. I think there's very different days. That was kind of in the days where Twitter was the biggest thing and there weren't really that many visuals, like putting images on Twitter wasn't a thing. But I digress. It was a very interesting experience. But ever since then, I've been to almost every edition. I think I missed the one right after COVID because it was a little bit hard to get to, but we're back and we're coming for the 2024 edition, and it'll be interesting.
So we were connected way back when, Miguel, because I went to a little press conference like 2 years before the first Vegas show when Ray was, announcing the fact he was starting the show in Las Vegas.
Well, there we go. Connecting way back when. So for anybody who's listening who hasn't been to IMEX America, I think we all refer to it as a really big show. I think for the industry, it's the biggest show. It's somewhere in the region of about 15,000 attendees. Now, I think there's much larger shows, especially in places like Vegas. It's not a large show by those means, but my view on it is that because it is a show based on kind of individual meetings, on people just meeting face to face and usually one-on-one meetings, it's very concentrated, like it's very dense. And so it can be very overwhelming when just how many people are in a relatively small space and how much noise is happening, how many conversations is happening. And I mean this in the way that if you go to a construction show, there's big construction vehicles, there's big things on display. It's a very different kind of environment. So I find it very overwhelming. Even though I've been so many times, it can be very overwhelming. And hopefully through this conversation, we can explain a little bit of how we approach it, right? And how we try to make the most of it. And I think if you've not already done this, things like making sure you book appointments, I kind of have this golden rule, which is if it's not in my calendar, it's not going to happen. It just won't, because you say, yeah, I'll try to pass by, I'll try to swing by, and then you're leaving the show and you kind of go like, oh, I thought I was going to see that person, but I didn't. So if it's not in my calendar, it won't happen. And the other thing that I think is super important in the preparation, which again, this might be a bit too late, but is really getting to know what the show floor looks like. And I have this idea that if you can, try to book appointments that are close to each other, because it's almost half a mile to cross the show floor, from end to end. And so if you're unfortunately booking appointments that are on opposite ends of the show floor, it's going to take a while. And don't try to make all your appointments, like the appointments are usually booked as half hours, but you need to end your appointments a little early because it's going to take a while to get to your next appointment, especially if it's quite far. Do either of you have something to add to that? I'm just doing a few sort of prep things that maybe there's a bit of time still to kind of think about, but anything that you particularly do to prepare for the show?
I like that you said if it's not in your calendar, you don't do it, because there's been so many years I've wanted to see people and we say to each other, okay, we'll see each other at IMEX. But if you don't make an appointment, you're not going to see each other.
Right. And a lot of people leave Thursday. So Thursday's a much lighter day, I noticed.
And that would be one of my tips. My favorite day of IMEX is Thursday. I always make sure I'm there for the entire day, because that's when you really could have in-depth conversations, because it is much quieter.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they leave Thursday kind of at different points during the day, so you get different kind of levels of activity.
And I'll never forget last year, they did a whole little dance line to close IMEX. So that was a lot of fun, and a drum circle.
Yeah. But don't forget, there's lots of education happening throughout the show. There's lots of things happening, and so, even on Thursday, so it's
Right.
still a good day to do that. And I mean, anecdotally, I've heard lots of exhibitors that make a point of sticking around, and sometimes they actually make very good business on Thursday. So it is. I don't think anybody will deny that it's a much lighter attendance on Thursday, but there's still good reason to stick around.
I agree.
So let's start with also something that we're doing. We're doing the Skift Meetings Innovation Lab on Monday. So if you're listening to this just as it launched, maybe you still have time to join us. It's at the Pacific Ballroom at the Mandalay Convention Center North, Pacific Ballroom C. It is the Skift Meetings Innovation Lab. It's only for planners, so apologies to anybody who's not a planner. But this is an event for planners to talk to planners. It's really an event for discussions, for peer-to-peer conversations. And what we're also going to do at this event is try to connect people so that when they are on the show floor, when they're out at IMEX, they really feel like they have a few connections, and that can help them make the most of the show. And we're going to be talking about some of the hot topics in the industry. I think budgets is sort of like number one from everybody that contributed to the Skift Meetings forum a couple of weeks ago. Budgets and rising costs was definitely the hot topic. So we're going to have conversations at tables around these hot topics, and we're going to have 2 hours of really connecting and learning together. But that's my kind of view. Anything you would add, Barbara or Andrea, about that event?
I just want to jump upon the budgets, how that was such a hot topic. And now it's even hotter because there's the dock workers strike all along in the US. So if this continues, it's going to increase the cost of supplies even. So it's really an important topic. And I'm sure we're going to chat about that on Monday.
And we're going to be sharing a little bit of research as well, and a few of the trends that we've spotted, and also some of the things we learned at Skift Meetings Forum from the attendees, because we also had some table conversations with participants, and there were some really good suggestions. I know, Barbara, you've been looking a little bit at what the attendees. Okay, so let's say it's Tuesday morning now. We're entering the IMEX show floor. If you can picture that in your minds, doors are open. There's that big crowd. You walk in, and there's hundreds of booths. Some are a couple of stories high. There's lights, there's sound, there's probably music playing, there's all these kind of things happening. Every exhibitor wants to attract that business onto their booth. What's the first thing that you do, or what would you recommend would be kind of the first thing that people do once they get there?
Well, if you're a first timer, don't make an appointment first thing. Just take in the show floor and see what is where, because throughout the show, you're going to have appointments. And sometimes if you're in E575 and you have to get to X, and that's not exactly the truth, but it could take 20 minutes to walk from one side to the other. So as a newbie, I would book appointment after appointment after appointment within factoring in the fact I had to walk from one side to the other. So that's important.
Yeah, totally agree. Barbara?
Well, I would just say breathe it all in. Like you said, Andrea, we love our industry. We love what we do. This is where the industry gathers. It's the biggest show. There's so much to see, and appreciate. I like to appreciate where I am a little bit instead of just like losing myself in my schedule. And yeah, it's like a bit of mindfulness in that moment, because some of the greatest connections I've made in my career have been at IMEX. And you're also going to, if you've been in the industry a while, you're going to see a lot of people and they're all gathered in the same place. So it's a pretty special week.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there, Andy. I would say if you can, unless you're completely booked up, I would say keep the first hour free, and just walk around and get to know where you are, get a kind of a sense for the place. I think there's a couple of things I would also mention. Figure out where the education area is if you want to do some education. The Inspiration Hub, that's sort of on the far left of the show floor. There's lots of different areas there, or different kind of different rooms, or different kind of setups for education. Get to know a little bit how to navigate the show floor. The floor plan is pretty straightforward when you kind of look at it, but once you're there, it's not always that obvious. And kind of looking for the booth numbers as well, they're a little bit complex. The booths are different sizes, different shapes, and the show floor has a certain logic to it, in the sense
Right.
that most of the European destinations, for example, will be in one area. Most of the hotel chain booths will be in a different area. So there's different kind of zones to the show floor, which is a little, they're not precise, but you'll probably get all the kind of Asian destinations in an area. And so that can also help you navigate it. And I think it's important, with one caveat, I would say, which I think is quite important. There are also relatively large booths that have consortiums of DMCs and kind of things like that. And so, for example, I don't know if you want to meet with somebody that is based in Arizona, they may not be on the Arizona booth, right? And so make sure you double check that booth number when you made that appointment, because they might be on a completely different part of the show floor, on a DMC booth, for example. And so sometimes you can get completely lost. Kind of you show up somewhere and you're like, I'm meeting with somebody from this destination, and actually they're in a completely different part of the show. So it can be a little bit, yeah, that can be overwhelming. And I think I've had that experience as a buyer and as an attendee before, that I definitely went to the wrong place. And as you said, the show floor is big, so that could give you another 10 or 20 minutes of walking around to find the right person.
Which brings up a topic we're covering: sneakers.
Yes. Yeah. Why don't you kick us off, Andrea? Because you've covered this in quite a bit.
So we wrote a story last year about the fact that sneakers were replacing stilettos on the show floor. And I think we wrote the story 2 years ago, and we saw that it was starting to be a trend. Then last year, you saw more branded sneakers. Like, I remember Orlando all had orange sneakers. So it just took off. So this year, we're going to be on the lookout for interesting sneakers, and we're going to run a story about it on Skift Meetings website. And if you have branded or really cool sneakers, please shoot us a photo.
And don't be surprised if we're photographing you, because we're planning to do that too. It's so interesting how there used to be a time when sneakers were just not even accepted at these shows. And maybe it's post COVID, but maybe it's the demographics. I don't really think it's the demographics. I think it's just, we realize that we want to get the most out of the show, and being comfortable is becoming a dress code for a lot of events. So I'm excited that IMEX went that way. I remember there was a photo of Karina with the IMEX sneakers that came out. Was that last year? Karina Bauer.
Yeah, they're so fun.
Yeah.
There's a number of different companies that are now doing kind of custom sneakers, so we're definitely on the lookout for those. But even if they're just individual sneakers, I think there's a really interesting kind of sneaker fashion game happening at IMEX. So we're interested in finding the best ones. But yeah, as you said, it definitely marks a difference in terms of dress code and expectations on the show floor.
And I remember 2 years ago, the Venetian took it even higher, that they had hosted buyers in the night before IMEX, and they customized their own sneakers. They had a spray paint artist who would write whatever you wanted. So It is.
Yeah.
And we have our own Skift sneakers, don't we?
We do. Well, I don't know if any of us have those, but there are some gift speakers, so they may make an appearance here or there. But of course, it brings up the point of trying to be comfortable. It can be a very exhausting time at IMEX, so wherever you can, take care of yourself. There's a number of wellness initiatives. There's obviously, I mean, this may not be obvious to everybody, but drinking lots of water. IMEX is in Las Vegas. Las Vegas is in the middle of the desert. And when you're in the middle of the desert, even if you're in Las Vegas with all the neon lights and everything around you, the air is very dry and it can be really tough on you. So it's important to drink water and just be kind to yourself. There's always something happening at IMEX America. There's definitely always something happening in Vegas. So that FOMO will be happening even though you're there. You're going to have fear of missing out even though you're at the show. And so it's important to just be kind and realize you can't do everything and try not to overbook yourself.
Are you tired of sifting through endless resumes looking for the perfect candidate to fill a leadership opening? Skift Executive Search can help. We have an insider view of the travel industry and can leverage both our expertise and connections to find your next rockstar hire. To learn more, visit skift.com/exec-search or email us at execsearch@skift.com.
And one thing I stress is even though the average temperature is going to be between 90 and 100 Fahrenheit, it is freezing in that convention center. So be sure to bring some sort of jacket or blazer.
Yeah, play that layers game, right? So make sure you have a few layers.
It's beautiful at night, really is, at this time of year. And a lot of the events are rooftop or outdoors, so you'll get to breathe in the fresh air too.
I have a secret. At one point during the day, I always step out of the convention center to have a few minutes of sun.
Yeah,
I always, because you have to see some sunlight at one point.
right.
That's a virtual cigarette break. You don't actually have to have the cigarette. You just have to have the break. Right?
Right. And I do that at least once a day when I'm at IMEX.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so let's kind of put ourselves in, I don't know, a newbies or anybody who kind of wants to experience IMEX. So you've made a few appointments. You've figured out where the education is if you want to do some of the sessions. There are a lot of sessions going on, so it can take a while to get through that kind of education listing, the program. But what else should people try to do when they're at the show floor? Is it just about the kind of one-on-one meetings with people that want to meet with them or they might have business with, or are there other things that they should be trying to do?
Well, for me, one thing I love to do is walk around the perimeter because a lot of the booths on the edge of the event are the newer entrants to the industry. And, you learn a lot doing that.
Yeah, good call.
And there's a tech hub. So if I have some free time, I head over there because I always walk away with something I didn't know.
Yeah, that's all the way on the far right. Yeah. I think one thing that I would also say, if you're interested in a destination or in a property or in a hotel or something like that, but particularly the destinations, if you're interested, but you don't necessarily have business to place at that destination, you're not at that point that you want to do those one-on-one meetings. A lot of the destinations or most of the destination booths, and that's how IMEX is structured. So if you're interested in a particular destination, the DMO, the destination marketing organization, will have the booth, the large booth, and then a lot of the suppliers will be on that booth. But a lot of them have the destination presentations, right? So you have these sort of introductions to a particular city or a particular country. And those can be really useful because they can give you this kind of introductory view on what's possible and kind of basic information. And they're not as intense as one-to-one meetings, but they're just sort of, a preview of what's possible at the destination. So if they match with something that I think you're looking for, I would definitely recommend signing up for those. And if you haven't done those in advance, you can always just approach the destination booths and ask them if they're doing those presentations. Most of them will run 2 or 3 times a day, and most of the booths have sort of small kind of theater areas where you can attend those. And they can be a lot of fun. Some of them are interactive. They'll usually have videos. They'll usually have some kind of introduction to the destination. Sometimes there's some food. So there's a lot going on there, and kind of to get that different idea of different destinations, I think it's an ideal starting point. And like no knowledge of the destination is assumed, right? There, it's a real kind of interesting starting point.
And it's so interesting because there's destinations from all over the world gathered in that one convention center. So you really can learn about all different destinations.
I think another thing I'd point out is so more and more different companies and different destinations are also creating activations on the show floor. You have I know Encore is doing something this year. I think they've done something for the last couple of years where they've done a sort of demonstration of AV and production, but in a really sort of hands-on. It's not a booth where you go and like look at pictures of their AV equipment or anything like that. They're actually producing, and there's usually connected to sustainability or DI or some sort of kind of thought leadership initiative, which I think is a really creative way of doing that. But I remember last year walking onto the show floor, while you're still in the kind of convention center corridor, there were already a number of activations, a number of kind of like walls where you could do things, you could touch, you could write, you could kind of interact. And from our conversations with Karina at the Skift Meetings forum a couple of weeks ago, I think there's going to be more of that. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how destinations and other suppliers in the industry are kind of activating and are bringing their brand to life.
And even last year, remember Google XI had a trail of different activations within bigger trade show booths that had some sort of neuro inclusion feature. And I remember in the Hello DMC booth, they had a color expert. Her name's Lori Weitzner. And it was a whole hands-on exhibition to see what color resonates with you and what that means about your personality. And there was a line waiting to get an analysis with her.
Yeah, and I think you make an interesting point. I think there are lots of things spread around the show floor that we don't necessarily know everything, right? So every year is a new discovery, but every destination is also trying to find different ways to attract people onto their booth, right? So I think there's different ways of doing that. The traditional ways are food and drink, right? I think there's some great coffee. I think Italy, Colombia always
Puerto
have
Rico. Puerto Rico
Puerto
has
Rico,
great
great
coffee.
coffee and different baristas, and you have cocktails and you have canapes. I think the hotel stands are particularly good at presenting a smorgasbord of food and different things that people can try, really to attract everybody onto the show. But I don't know, maybe do you have any favorites outside of the obvious that you can think of ways that the different booths have attracted people from the show floor kind of onto the booth?
Well, Hyatt always has a really great chef who makes vegan food throughout the day. So if I don't have time for lunch, I often pop over there.
Nice.
And
nice.
it's really health forward. So that's what I like.
Right. I think booth design in itself is pretty interesting. It used to be that there were walls and you'd be entering a private space, but it's really moved away from that because they can't get people inside. So now a lot of these booths don't even have walls,
And
and
what
very, very welcoming.
and what I like is how the different areas are decorated to look like that area. Like New York has,
Right.
all New York stuff, and then Las Vegas has the neon lights, and you're in Las Vegas just by standing in that area.
Yeah, they definitely have a personality, right? I mean, I remember
Absolutely.
one last year that stood out for me, which was, I don't know if it was for the right reasons, but it definitely stood out, right? Which was the Visit Seattle booth. A relatively straightforward booth, but then on the back end of the booth, there was a gum wall.
Oh, I
I think
remember.
it was
No,
called.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, so apparently, I mean, I'm not that familiar with Seattle, so apologies to Visit Seattle and Seattle, but we're talking about Visit Seattle, so it can't be the bad thing. There was there was a little gum ball dispenser, and you could eat some gum, and then when you were kind of done with it, you could stick it on the wall, which is not the most hygienic thing necessarily, but I think there's a tradition in Seattle. There's a particular kind of street or wall in Seattle where people do that, and it's become kind of a thing. So they were kind of saying, hey, this is where you do that we're building our own here at IMEX. And so I think it's really interesting because that sticks with you, right? Like I'm definitely remembering it a year
It does
later
stick with you.
as something
Yeah,
that exactly. Yeah, literally. um
All right, there was an activation pre-COVID that will be with me for the rest of my life. I actually got a tattoo in the New Zealand.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Good.
It was a Maori from New Zealand, and I'm not the best at decisions. So you didn't tell him what you wanted. He told you what you needed.
Yeah, you had to sit down, have a conversation. There was a dialogue. It wasn't like you showed up with a pre-made diagram, right, or a pre-made drawing or
Right.
anything.
And I
Right?
have my first and only tattoo from IMEX. So thank you.
There you go. You have permanent ink from
Permanent
from
coloring.
yeah. Any stand out to you, Barbara?
I think a big part of it is take the opportunities when you're at one of these receptions, booth receptions, whatever it is, to just meet as many people as you can. It is such a welcoming environment. It's a friendly environment. And you just never know who you're going to bump into. There's that 6-person rule. I mean, guaranteed you'll immediately have something in common and potentially something you can do together. So I just try to talk to people all day long. I mean, I go home and I'm, drinking drinking tea because I've been talking all day. So
and some of the best story ideas I've gotten are just from conversations like you described, Barbara.
What about outside the show floor? I'll just leave it there, maybe. Outside the show floor, obviously the show floor is where is the main attraction, but there's plenty happening outside the show floor. What would you say would be your highlight, Barbara, in terms of outside the show floor activities? And I guess I'm referring more to the kind of nighttime activities, but there are other things.
yeah, but I did want to mention the inspiration, the inspiration area and all the different breakouts that take place right on the show floor. They're so worth going to. I know I've spoken at some of them, and you get this huge, not huge, but the small group, but like it's packed into these kind of unconventional meeting settings, and the topics are fascinating. Club Ichi's going to be there. There are a lot of really cool um, cool uh, people and presentations that are going to happen in that. It's the back left corner of the show. So definitely. And as far as events, it's so easy to become overbooked. There are so many of them. It's sometimes hard to find people. So you really need to plan ahead and text and have their number in your phone, and you will find who you're looking for. But again, just strike up a conversation at a party with thousands of people, and you never know what's going to happen or who you're standing next to.
I think if you're a hosted buyer, you probably already received hundreds of invitations to meetings, but also to events, right? But there are a few ticketed events that you can also attend, like Site Night. I think on the first night on the Monday, that's quite a large event. There's the MPI Rendezvous on the Wednesday night. So there are a number of events. But I think I remember Karina saying at Skift Meetings Forum a few weeks ago that she doesn't get invited to most parties that happen at IMEX. So there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of different things, and it kind of depends how you end up. But there are a lot of things that happen afterwards. Some of the destinations, some of the hotel companies will book out some of the venues in Vegas, some of the restaurants within the Mandalay Bay, and then have kind of receptions. And I don't want to say everybody's invited, because that's definitely not the case. But I think it's always asking the question, and particularly if you're a buyer or a hosted buyer, usually you're very welcome. I think we have to acknowledge that that's what the show's about. It's about generating business between buyers and suppliers. So let's talk a little bit about some of the, I guess, golden rules of IMEX, maybe, but maybe the implicit rules of IMEX that maybe we should make explicit, right? And I think you thought of something, Andrea. What was that?
Well, if you make an appointment with someone, make sure you keep it, because their time is so valuable and people are trying to meet with other people in a very condensed space. So don't have an appointment and just blow it off. It's not respectful.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
that applies for both sides, right? So both on the buyer side, but also on the supplier side. I mean, I've heard plenty of times anecdotes where buyers show up to the booth and then the supplier's not there or has already left or something like that. I mean, that's definitely not the best form.
And get a contact number before your meeting, Because if something does happen, be sure to text that person and explain so then maybe they can meet with someone else.
Yeah. I think that's excellent advice because most of the time we rely on email for the calendars, etc. But not everybody's on email at the show, right? You're busy, you're talking to other people. It's not easy to sort of check in on your emails all the time. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, just pick up on people's cues. You can always meet later. You can always set up a Zoom or set up a call when you get back. And if they just seem to be harried or rushed or whatever, it's much more being accommodating to them will get you further than trying to like squeeze in your message.
And the bottom line is IMEX is a place where business gets done. And I
Right.
totally respect that. So if there's someone I want to talk to, but say it's a director of sales for a hotel company and I see they have potential business they want to meet with, I just say I'll see you later in the in booth happy hour because most do have. So then I can have the conversation there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth acknowledging. It's a trade show, like all trade shows. It's transactional in nature, so people are there to do business. And if you're a buyer but you don't have business, or you're a supplier, you're looking out for the right buyers, I think that's perfectly fine. I think everybody should be respectful of one another, but there is, it's worth acknowledging that and kind of making sure that happens. And I think that's also true for invitations to parties and things like that. There's a lot of great invitations, but they're aimed at the buyers. They're aimed at the people with the business, right? So I think that's what's going on. But let's talk about introverts. That's something we've covered a little bit. This all sounds wonderful, but we've been a number of times. We know a lot of people there. If you're a newbie and you're an introvert, how do you manage this? What's the best way to kind of deal with something like IMEX America?
Well, there are some first timer gatherings, so definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point.
Well, also events like our innovation lab on Monday. They're pre-show. You can create connections there and then be in touch with those people throughout the show so that you're not walking into a huge party by yourself. So
And
use those pre-show events to your favor.
and it's great to have a buddy. And even if you're a first timer, use the app to your advantage and find people that are attending that may have similar interests or are in a similar industry to you. And then maybe you could meet at a party or you could walk the show floor first thing together. So if you have a buddy, it helps.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely both really good pieces of advice. I also think any of the education sessions are probably good places to start as well, because you immediately get to. So a lot of the education is interactive, so you'll also get to meet people there. But just to sort of get a sense of what's going on and what people are talking about, they're very low risk kind of barrier to entry. Everybody can access those.
And
And yeah,
there's
any
and then there's certain hangout spots like Google XI has that huge area on the show floor and you could do the wheel of belonging. And as you do this, you'll meet other people
Yep.
And converse. And then also just find the little areas. And then there's also some little rooms of Zen when you need a few minutes just to yourself.
Neat.
Identify where they are and just go and decompress.
A big temptation for all of us is we still have to do our jobs while we're there, and there's this push to get on your phone and use every spare minute to check emails and whatnot. I think that's a lost opportunity. If you're sitting in a session and waiting for it to start, strike up a conversation with the person next to you. No, don't be on your phone. We're not there to be on our phones.
That's good advice.
Yeah, I think that's good. Um, yeah, I think it's important to just point out that it's a very friendly environment. It's a safe space where everybody's going to be talking to strangers for much of their time there. So it's an easy place just to say hello and have a chat. And not every connection is going to lead to wonderful things, but some will. And I think the more you kind of try, I think the more opportunities you'll have to do that.
And it's a marathon, not a sprint. So pace yourself. Don't.
What a great line.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start wrapping up, but just kind of want to kind of figure out from your personal perspective, what's your favorite part of being at IMEX? Are there things that you're really looking forward to doing this week at IMEX?
Well, I like to meet industry colleagues for sure, people I haven't seen all year. So to me, it's almost a bit of a celebration.
It's a reunion. I agree with you. I think the biggest joy for me is walking down an aisle and seeing someone I haven't seen in years who just happens to be there, didn't know they were coming. There's a lot of that as you walk around. If you've been in the industry for a while, it's just the pleasure we all get in being at this particular show.
And it's the hub of news. I mean, I get story ideas that carry me throughout the year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
Again,
already have 2 embargoed trends reports that are being introduced at IMEX that will release next week.
right. That's what we do. We go to a lot of press conferences and spend our time gathering information. So if you have something that you think is a story, just like if you have great sneakers, look for us.
But also breaking news. We love breaking news, and we're there to work, work, work. It's not play.
Absolutely. I think, I'm definitely seeing that more and more. I don't know if you agree with me, but I'm definitely seeing this show is becoming more and more a place where people want to want to announce things. I've seen a lot of things, a lot of people teasing already that they're going to be announcing something big at IMEX. So I have a feeling it's going to be quite a busy show for us.
And it is a show not to miss, because it's where the industry gathers, where all the stories are, the people you need to meet. So see you in Vegas.
Any last tips for Vegas newbies? Because Vegas is a whole experience in itself as well, and I think we've all been a few times. Any tips on how to handle that?
Give yourself extra time in the morning getting to the convention center, because if you're on the other end of the strip, it's a bit of a distance, and sometimes the traffic around the convention center can be tough in the morning.
I will say that if you think you can walk from one spot to the other, give it another thought, because things seem so much closer than they actually are. And you see a resort, in the distance, and you think, oh, I can walk there. And it's just not that simple. Sometimes sidewalks take you across the boulevard and then up escalators and,
and all those footbridges.
All of a sudden it's 45 minutes later. So
you get to see Elvis 3 or 4 times along the way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Those hotel buildings, those iconic hotel buildings, they're very large buildings. You don't realize how large they are.
And my very first IMEX, I was staying at Caesars, and it was at Mandalay Bay, which is a distance. And I said, oh, you know what? I like to walk. I'll have the exercise. By the time I got to the convention center, I'm soaking wet with sweat because it was like 90 degrees in the morning. So I was like, not a good idea. And a lot of the hotels have shuttles for free that go to IMEX. So check out with your hotel.
Yep. Great advice there. Okay. So wrapping up, all 3 of us are going to be at IMEX America. I think that's been, hopefully that's been clear, but maybe worth clarifying. We're all going to be there with two more of our colleagues. We'd love to meet any listeners of the podcast, anybody who thought this was useful, anybody who thought any of our other episodes were good, bad, or just crazy. I mean, we just like to connect with any of our listeners and anybody who reads Skift Meetings. So if you want to arrange a meeting, because we will be roaming the show floor looking for the best news, the best insights, the best education, get in touch with us by email. meetings@skift.com is the magic address, and we'll do our best to connect and meet at the show. And I just want to wish everybody who will be at IMEX America a fantastic show. And anybody who won't, that's okay too. I hope that you enjoy our coverage of the show floor. I hope it's relevant to you, and I hope that we can bring the show to life through our coverage. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey there, if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. That really helps us get out the word about the Skift Meetings podcast and make sure that we can continue to bring you this podcast every week absolutely free of charge. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out.
With more than 50 articles per week, exclusive feature stories twice a month, Live events, podcasts, reports, and more, Skift is the source for global travel industry news. See what we've been up to at skift.com and stay ahead with the latest insights and trends shaping the future of travel.